Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki. Vrindavan Dhama Ki. Mayapur Navadvip Dhama Ki. Nilachal Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki. Ganga Mai Ki. Yamuna Mai Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Tulsi Maharani Ki. Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki. Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. This morning we will be reading the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 11, verse 32. No sheets. So Srimad Bhagavatam 4:11:32. Yena upashrishtat purushat loka udvijate brisham na buddha tat vasham gachet icchan abhayam atmana yenopashrishtat purusha loka udvijate brisham na buddhastad vasham gached icchan abhayamatmana yenopashrishtat purusha loka udvijate brisham na buddhastad vasham gached icchan abhayamatmana yenopashrishtat purusha loka udvijate brisham na buddhastad vasham gached icchan abhayamatmana. Vaishnavis. Yena, by which, upasrishtat, being overwhelmed, purushat, by the person, loka, everyone, udvijate, becomes terrified, brisham, greatly, na, never, buddha, a learned person, tat, of anger, vasham, under the control, gachet, should go, icchan, desiring, abhayam, fearlessness, liberation, atmana, of the self. Translation. A person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. Please repeat. A person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A devotee or saintly person should not be dreadful to others, nor should anyone be a source of dread to him. If one treats others with non-enmity, then no one will become his enemy. There is the example, however, of Jesus Christ, who had enemies, and they crucified him. The demoniac are always present, and they find fault even in saintly persons. But a saintly person never becomes angry, even if there is very great provocation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Yeno pashrishtat purushal loka udvijate brisham na budashtad vasham gachet icchan nabhayam atmanaha. A person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. Hare Krishna. So anger, what a topic. I hope no one's going to become a little upset or angry by the content of this presentation this morning. But we've all become angry from time to time. Who here hasn't experienced or expressed anger in the last week? Ooh, we've all had the experience some way or the other, even within the last week, right? And interestingly enough, we find anger, just from a psychological perspective, anger has its roots in many places, and one root is based in fear, isn't it? We are fearful of a certain result, of a certain situation. So we express anger in the hope that it will combat that situation. And in the word-for-word translation, Prabhupada, he, interestingly enough, translates abhayam. We know abhay means. What does abhay mean? Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. What does his name mean? Abhay means? Bhaya means fear, and abhay means fearlessness. But Prabhupada says, abhayam, fearlessness, and then he says, liberation. And in the translation, Prabhupada writes, a person who desires liberation from the material world. In other words, desires to be fearless. Fearlessness is actually liberation, to be fearless. So we become angry very often. And if we take a step back and we analyze the whole experience of our recent anger, in most cases, what was the eventual result or emotion that after one settled down from being angry, what is the emotion one had eventually? What came up? Remorse, regret. Very rarely if one is truly honest with oneself, does one say, yes, my anger was justified. But in your quiet moments, in your room, where no one's there to test you in any way, you think, hey, why did I react like that? That was foolish of me. Generally, we feel like that. So when we're in the midst of the experience, or experiencing anger, or expressing anger, we feel that anger is like the main weapon in our arsenal, right? We have this arsenal of defense weapons that when something approaches us and threatens to affect us in some way adversely according to our idea of sense gratification, of our protection, then we have this whole array of weapons. And anger is generally one of the main weapons we have to protect ourselves, to assert ourselves, to protect our rights. But as the Mahabharata says, anger, this emotion, anger, actually is an enemy with the face of a friend. It's a nice line, huh? It's an enemy with the face of a friend. We think we can use anger to our benefit. In other words, friends are meant to benefit us, and we benefit our friends. But this emotion, anger, has the face of a friend, but it is really an enemy. And what does an enemy do to us? An enemy causes what to us? Causes harm and pain to us. So that very emotion, that very thing, that has the face of a friend, that seems to be helping us, seems to be benefiting us, is actually an enemy. Is actually an enemy. We think that by expressing our anger, how many of you in the last week gave someone a piece of your mind? You let them have it. Huh? We think that by expressing our anger, giving someone a piece of our mind, we will be in a better place. But what was the result we all expressed just now of that anger eventually? Regret, remorse. It's not a nice feeling to have that feeling of remorse and regret, isn't it? It's like, oh, why did I do that? You just want to slap yourself if you can. And the thing with this problem of anger, that the result, you cannot just wipe it away with some cloth and water. The damage that is done when expressing one's anger is very deep. You can't just dust it away and sweep it away. It doesn't work like that. It's very, very deep results. And we know, even from our own expressions of anger, or we read about it or hear about it with others, the results of anger can be very tragic, isn't it? We may have experienced it ourselves. Relationships are broken. Friendships become strained. How many of you had friendships strained through expressions of anger, either your own or your friend? And the friendship is never the same again. Anybody? We've experienced it, right? It's just never the same again. relationships have broken, you never want to speak to that person, or even though you may realize in your dark, quiet moments that actually, why did I react like that? But the pride gets the better of us and we won't go forward to make amends. It runs very deep, right? To say sorry, to apologize is too much of a thing to swallow to be able to do that because of anger. We've made such an outburst of anger that it's too hard. Families become ruined due to anger. Countries go to war because of anger, expressions of anger. And Mahabharata also says that through anger, one can become so bewildered, one can lose it to the extent that one will be even willing to kill one's child or one's parent. But that's becoming so common nowadays, isn't it? One becomes so angry, so hateful, that killing one's father or mother, parent or child or wife, husband, becomes like the easiest path out, the easiest way out, we find. So Prabhupada says here in the purport, the way he translates it, that the person desiring liberation. Liberation means what? To be free from all the trappings of material existence. And anger, we read in Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam, is one of the most powerful trappings that imprisons the living entity, the conditioned souls in the material world. So to give way to anger is antithetical to desiring liberation. It goes against it. Completely goes against it. So that's expressing anger. What to speak of harboring anger? Sometimes we feel it, but we are so in control of ourselves, right? We can pat ourselves on the shoulder. Hey, I got angry, this person upset me, but I held it within. I grit my teeth and I took it. But boy, if he just said one more thing, I would have let him have it, right? Just that one more thing, but we can pat ourselves that we controlled our anger. But even harboring anger is self-destructive. It's described. Lord Buddha says that harboring anger is like holding on to coal with the desire to throw it into someone else, burning coal. What happens to you when you're holding burning coal? You're burning your own palm, isn't it? You're hurting yourself. So even harboring anger is very self-destructive. So harboring anger is self-destructive. Expressing it causes so much of destruction. So what do we do? What do we do? What will help is, just as if we have a disease, we need to know what has caused the disease so we can avoid those causes, isn't it? If we know that, like most diseases are caused in this world is due to uncleanliness, right? Most diseases, or irregulation and uncleanliness. So when we regulate ourselves, when we wash our hands, be clean in our habits, then we can avoid most diseases. We can protect ourselves, right? And we eat properly and so on. Similarly with anger. And Krishna in the third, second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Where does he say anger comes from? Dhyayato vishayan pungsham sangateshu pajayate. What's the first thing that we do eventually when we come to, before we come to anger? We put some contemplation, some meditation, dhyayato vishaya. The living entity, the pungsang, this living entity, this person, he puts contemplation, he puts meditation on the objects of the senses, the vishaya. And sangateshu pajayate. And by that association we become attached. Attachment arises. And eventually from attachment, what happens? Lust develops. And then from lust, because we're lusting after it, this is the nature of the sense objects in the material world. You lust after it. What must come eventually is anger. Why? Because when you lust after the sense object, two things will happen in the material experience. You will not get it because it's too far out of your reach. It's not within your karmic balance to buy that sense object, the experience of enjoying that sense object. So you get angry, you get frustrated that, the world is so unfair. That person has it and I don't have it. How can he have it? And, you get angry and you express it. Or you get it eventually and it doesn't live up to its hype. It doesn't really satisfy you the way it was built out to be or the way you thought. So you get angry there as well. So after lust, after contemplating the objects of our senses, meditating on it, we become attached to it. We start developing ideas and plans how to acquire it, how my life will improve. We start building a whole dream around these sense objects. Or we don't get the thing eventually, or we get it and we get frustrated by the experience. Then we become angry. We become so very, very angry. And then after anger, Krishna says, this leads us to delusion, bewilderment, loss of intelligence. And when your intelligence gets lost, Krishna says, what happens to us? We fall down, or we just perpetuate ourselves in this material existence. So the root of anger, the immediate root of anger, is lust or karma. It's the corollary of lust, the direct consequence of lust. And Krishna in the 3rd chapter also says, Kama esha, Krodha esha, Raja Guna Samudbhava. Mahashana Mahapapma Vidyanam Iha Vairinam. That it is lust alone, right? Krishna really focuses on lust. He pinpoints lust to be this all-devouring, sinful enemy of this world. It is everything that's the problem with this world is found in this whole emotion of lust. It is lust. And the cause of lust is, as we read in that verse on the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is material attachment. These sense objects, when one becomes attached to it, then lust arises and then eventually turns into anger. So when we dwell on these material objects, become attached to it, then that's eventually results in lust and anger. So if the cause of lust, which eventually leads to anger, is material attachment, then it's safe to say that one has to then reduce one's material attachments. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Right? Isn't it? Just look at your material attachments, count them all up. Right. Today, number 1 goes. Next week, number 2 goes. We just tick it off the box. But then it has a habit of just coming back and knocking on the door. Right? It comes through the back door or finds a loop through the window somewhere and enters. And you wake up one day, hear a sound in the kitchen somewhere. Oh, there's this nice object of my senses that are there again, waiting to allure me in some way or some form. But we have to come back with our intelligence, controlling our mind, clearing our memory to remember that, hey, I had this object, I had this experience. It wasn't that great. It wasn't built out. The experience wasn't what was advertised. We have to have good memory and remember that. Or we look at what others, don't look at the billboards or the television reminders, but hear directly from people who are honest, like your friends. Having good friends who are honest really helps. When they can express their experiences of their material attachments in an honest way to you, if they're really honest, of course some people temporarily will experience some pleasure because you know what? There is some pleasure in this material world. We can't say that there is no pleasure. There is something there. But that pleasure comes with a twist, always. That you experience it, it's so small that it seems so, but still it seems so amazing, but it comes with a twist. Like a thorn, right? What was that example we hear? of the camel in the desert, the pleasure that the camel in the desert gets, right? From fulfilling its need for some, for its thirst, to satiate its thirst. It chews onto a thorny plant, and the thorn cuts its tongue, blood comes out and wets the tongue. So there is pleasure, but that pleasure is really painful. Really, really painful. And the result of that pleasure is very, very destructive, ultimately. So still, material attachment is the cause, and reducing material attachment is essentially the actual cure. The actual cure. The more we have, then we find the more we will lust after those things. The more we will have to lust after. And the more there will be the opportunity to become angry. Right? The more the opportunity will be present to become angry. And in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the divine and the demoniac, Krishna says that those with demoniac mentality, they are always prone to anger due to their insatiable lust and by being bound by a network of illusions. Bound by a network. You're in a mesh of all these material sense objects and being attached to it. So the more we aspire to acquire, have within us, when I first joined the ashram in Phoenix some years ago, I came with a bag, a luggage case about this big. That was everything I brought. Just this big. This much. Brahmachari ashram ki jai. Brahmacharini ashram ki jai. And about maybe like 20 years later, I was reminded of that. And the brahmachari leader at that time was Briyat Mridanga Bhakti Briyat Bhagavat Swami, and he saw my bag, and he said, "You should strive not to let your belongings grow more than that." And then 20 years later, somehow I remembered it, and I thought, wow, Krishna consciousness is Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. It's ever expanding. I've probably got 40 of those bags now. You have to put all your possessions in, right? So, yeah, we have a network of illusions, and the more we have. So, reducing what we have is essential. Expanding and expanding and expanding and hoarding is a symptom of fear. Think about it deeply. We keep all these things to give us protection, to give ourselves meaning, that I may need this 2 years down the line. How many of you have things in your room in the ashram that you haven't looked at or haven't used for the last 6 months? Please go today and get rid of it, because if you haven't used it in 6 months, you're not going to use it. Mahatma Prabhu, I was listening to a class some years ago, he was talking about the 60-40 principle, or was it 80-20 principle of possessions and hoarding. He says they did a survey of people who bought a new house, and they packed up their old home and they were ready to move into the new house. But just before they could, the new place wasn't ready to move all their stuff. So they had to move into another place, but they could only take maybe 20% of their things, and the rest had to be put in storage. So for 2 months, these people lived with 20% or 40% of their things very comfortably, no issues. And they realized that, hey, I could do without 60% of the things I have in my home. I really didn't want to go through my stuff, because I realized I would be very, very embarrassed that I could do away with 60%. Of course, if all your stuff is books, then it's different. You can't do with 40% of your books. You need all of it, right? You need everything. So yeah, but still it's not that black and white based on just physical objects. Making a show of material austerity also can be deceiving, can also be very deceiving. Being materially detached doesn't mean one just has 2 dhotis, no socks, doesn't mean that. It does help, because there's less to get angry about, But if you have so little, if you're depriving yourself to such an extent, then you'll be hankering more. Oh, that person in the upstairs room in the ashram, so nice. He's got a nice cupboard there. He's got 10 dhotis. And that girl next to me in the ladies' ashram has got so many saris. I've only got 2. But I'm making a show of how austere I am. No, one has to know, one has to live within one's quota, one's need. What they say sometimes, the world is more than enough for everyone's need, but not sufficient for one man's greed. The world will never be enough. That was the title of an old James Bond movie. See, now I'm disturbing your spiritual minds by telling you about the James Bond movie. But like, the richest man in the world at one time, John Paul Getty, was once asked by a reporter, can you summarize the philosophy of your life in one word? And without having to think, he said, more. That's the philosophy of my life. I just want more and more and more. And when you don't get it, boy, that's when anger rears its ugly head. So yes, the external signs of reducing material possessions is not enough. What about the subtle things that we hanker for? Respect, adoration, prestige, service from others. These things are there. We need to reduce that. Or we even need to reduce the hankering for it. Because one gets angry when one doesn't get it, isn't it? For anyone who has been honored or respected, especially in the course of preaching, I'm sure preachers will know you get some praise. And when you don't get it the next time from the person, hey, what's wrong with this person? Like people who give class or do kirtan, like if you can wake up the dead with your kirtan, if people don't tell you that the next day, you feel something in the heart. Feel something in the heart. And especially when you see someone else that you're not very inclined to, they getting it, how does it feel in your heart? I know that fella, he doesn't get up for Mangalati half the time. He goes and gives one nice class, and they respect him so much. I do so much of hard work, and I don't get it. It kind of like hurts the heart, right? Hurts the heart. But we forget there's something called karma, or there's something called Krishna's arrangement and Krishna's desire that is organizing everything ultimately. So yes, it has to go much deeper than just material possessions. We have to rid ourselves of the material hankering, the hankering for material subtle things like prestige, respect, adoration, fame, and so on, even those things. Then Krishna in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, towards the end, he really explores lust. Really. Kama esha, krodha esha, like we said, right? It is lust that is born from the contact of which mode? The mode of passion, rajagun. And then what happens to it? It becomes krodha. Kama esha becomes krodha. It transforms itself into anger or into wrath, as Srila Prabhupada translates krodha. And that anger is that lust is the all-devouring enemy of this world. Sinful enemy of this world. Now in that verse, we find that something comes into contact with rajagun, with the mode of passion, and then it becomes lust. So what is it? Krishna is giving a hint. What is it that is coming in contact with the material mode of passion so that it becomes lust? That is the living entity's tendency to serve and to love. You heard of that famous phrase, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's books, transforming lust into love. But how did lust come into being in the first place? Because our natural tendency to love Krishna, to love each other on the spiritual platform, was contaminated by material association of these modes, especially rajagun, passion. We develop the emotion or the consciousness that is lusty. This is important. And in any case, we are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. So lust is there in the Supreme Lord, isn't it? We hear about the Lord's lusty pastimes with his devotees, the gopis of Vrindavan. But that is not. It expresses itself. the way we may consider what lust to be, but actually it is the purest form of love. And we have that in our hearts. That love is there in our hearts. So Krishna consciousness ultimately is a process to purify our innate tendency to love and serve Krishna, transforming that nature back into the loving tendency. Transforming it back from love into love. And Krishna says also further on that this lust is found where? In the living entity. Where is it found? What are the three sort of strategic sitting places? You know, like there's a war and the enemy captures very strategic places to defeat the opponent. So there's three very strategic positions in the consciousness, in the living entity, that lust is seated, and that is in the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. These are the three places. And when we know these are the three strategic positions that lust targets, we, to protect ourselves from this all-devouring sinful enemy, we have to protect the senses, we have to protect the mind, and we have to protect the intelligence from the onslaught of lust. We have to do that. And Krishna says, what is the first place? What is the first thing we have to do to protect ourselves from this enemy? We have to regulate the senses. Now, how many of you have tried regulating the senses? Ooh, boy, that's not easy. That's not difficult. That's very difficult. So difficult. It was Ekadashi yesterday, right? Everybody knows. I looked at the watch this morning, 6:52. Okay, at 6:45, I wasn't hungry. It's not like I eat every day. Just like something in my mind, and you had to like do it. You sort of impelled by some unknown force, you had to break your fast, right? No, I don't have to, but something in me felt, hey, I should do it. And I was thinking, I'm preparing for this class on lust and anger, and here I am, without any need or impetus, I'm eating something at 6:45 in the morning. It didn't make sense. And then to others who question it, says, well, it's really good for blood sugar and things that you need to do it. So we validate our lust and anger in so many ways, right? We can do that in so many ways. These three places are there that we have to do it. So, but yes, sense control is very, very difficult. But Krishna also then says that the senses, they are superior to dull matter. And above the senses is the mind. And superior to the mind is the intelligence. And above all of them is the pure spirit soul. You and I, we are above all these things. So instead of trying to fast half a day every day, or only have Ekadashi every day, and looking at others with nice plates of prasad. I heard this morning there's feast or something. I don't know. There's feast almost every other day here, And one may wonder, how do you devotees control your senses and regulate your senses? You just go down there and, oh boy, better we walk down to our room the other way instead of walking past it. Right? But because to be true to our innate nature, the spirit soul, Krishna says all we really have to do is engage everything in Krishna conscious, regulated Krishna conscious activities. It's not that we control the sense of the tongue or eating by not eating. How do we control it? By eating sumptuous Krishna prasadam, according to the need that we have. How do we control our mind, the needs of the mind? How do we control the intelligence? By engaging the activities of the mind and intelligence in Krishna conscious activities. Hearing and chanting, dancing in kirtan, seeing the deities. What could be a more beautiful form than Radha Radhanath? I mean, men will get very allured by some beautiful woman coming into the temple, or we see on the billboards, or women may get bewildered similarly by a man, or nowadays it's also all is the same in many ways. But we get bewildered by opposite gender, the same genders, or we get bewildered by some attribute someone has, beauty, fame, wealth, strength, prestige, so many things. What can those attributes, or the extent that they have, objectively compare with Radha Radhanath and Mahaprabhu? But how many of us sit in front of Radha Radhanath for hours on end, looking at them, drinking in their beauty, as compared to contemplating the beauty of what's out there in the material world? So simply by engaging in a regulated way, through the process of Krishna consciousness, our mind, our senses and intelligence in Krishna consciousness, we can control, we can subdue, we can conquer the enemy of lust. And Prabhupada very nicely in that purport says, that solves the whole problem. That's like my favorite line in all of the scriptures. In purport, that solves the whole problem. Because we got problems, right? How many of you have problems? We all have problems. And if, when I first came also to Krishna consciousness, there was this whole wave at that time. I'm sorry to say, but that ashram that we joined, we kind of started the whole Ayurvedic thing in South Africa. We met one doctor somewhere in Bond Street, one serving out of one little grocery store, and we started going to him. And I remember all of us had different problems, some issue. We all had different stuff. Brihat Maharaj, Jai Prabhu, Smita Krishna Prabhu, me and a few others staying there. Different issues. And this doctor gave us the same medicine. The same medicine. It was called, I remember, it was called Raj Bindu. Raj Bindu. I have never seen it in the last 20 years. But you see the list of the remedies that it takes, it has. It was like 30 different things. I'm like, so similarly, simply by engaging these senses and the mind and the intelligence, it's a one-stop solution for everything. It is the Raj Bindu of all issues, the transcendental Raj Bindu. This is it. This is how Krishna consciousness works, because it solves the entire problem. Now, at the same time, we're talking so much bad about anger. Right? But like, I think, wait, let me just read the previous verse. Prabhupada says, he discusses a point and he says, he should not forget to become angry, at least for the time being, in order to drive away the miscreants. Right? Like once Prabhupada was in Madras in a room conversation, speaking to people, and he made such a nice presentation on Krishna consciousness. And then he asked a few people that were there, 10 or 15, so what do you think? And one young European boy, about 20 odd years old, said, yes, and we will all learn to love each other, be kind to each other, and we will be less angry. And Prabhupada said, what's wrong with becoming a little angry? Look at this boy, got a bit startled and bewildered. And he said, well, if you become angry, it'll be hard to have peace of mind. It's a good, response. And then Prabhupada said, anyway, that is just some speculation. Because Krishna himself gets angry, Prabhupada said. Krishna gets angry. And we are part and parcel of Krishna. And Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to what end? To make Arjuna angry. How can you fight without being angry? Lovingly shoot your arrows to the person with such feeling and heartfelt emotion. You read descriptions like this. No, they blew their conch shells, terrified the hearts of the opponent, and they were fighting with such menace and anger and devastation. There's no flowery words when in the battle. No. So Prabhupada was saying that. And Prabhupada said, and Krishna also says that I am lust, I am calm, according to dharma. Right? He says that. So anger, just like heat, when properly applied in the right place by the right person with the right intelligence, has its use. Like Arjuna employed anger in the service of Krishna. Who else employed anger in a proper way? Who else? in our Vedic histories. Hanuman, my word. Hanuman celebrated Diwali in Lanka. Right? He just went out and he burned the whole of Lanka. Phew. And he was having fun exhibiting his anger. That's another interesting thing. On the material level, if one deeply analyzes anger, it's actually a very weird form of sense gratification. When you're in the midst of it, it's like you've got this power surging through you, right? That I can say what I want, do what I want, hurt in any way. It sort of gives you this Shakti, and you taste it. It's very nice. But it's mundane. That same Shakti will be the cause of our undoing. So Hanuman experienced anger. He used anger in the service of Ram. Right? He was ready to destroy the entire Rakshasa army and take Sita back with him. But Sita had to restrain him. But he had to do something. He had that need to fulfill, in the service of Ram. So he had the need of anger. He wanted to do something, but he employed it in a positive way. He burned the whole of Lanka. Who else? Nrsingadev, yes. Oh, what a manifestation. The ultimate manifestation of anger. It took so long to subdue him. But only when his pure devotee came before him, Prahlad, anger wasn't needed anymore. He could see Prahlad was safe, protected. The need for anger had passed. And then what he had become after it? He became like the lion, the lioness. Where's that verse from? Where we worship Nrsingadev for being like a mother. Protective like a mother, but all at the same time loving like a mother. Right? He was licking the body of Prahlad. This is a beautiful verse. I'll find it later. Really, really nice verse discussing the relationship between Prahlad and Lord Nrsingadev. And in the purport here, Prabhupada says that if one treats others with non-enmity, then no one will become his enemy. And the perfect example of that is Maharaj Yudhisthira. Yudhisthira, one of his names is Ajata Shatru. Shatru literally means enemy. And Ajata means not born. Jata means birth. Ajata means not born. So Yudhisthira is that person whose enemy was never born. But Yudhisthira had enemies. Right? No. Those persons saw Yudhisthira as their enemy, but Yudhisthira never saw anyone as his enemy. Therefore, he has the name Ajata Shatru. He never saw anyone as his enemy. He actually never saw anyone even as his superior. There's that interesting pastime or test that was given by Dronacharya to Duryodhan and Yudhisthira. He sent both of them out with similar tasks with just a little twist to it. He told Duryodhan, you go out and I want you to not come back to me until you find someone who is more qualified than you. You go out and find someone who is more qualified than you. And he told to Yudhisthira, you go out and not come back until you find someone who is less qualified than you. So they both went out and they came back late at night and they were like so demoralized. So what were your findings, Dronacharya? He said, I tried my very best, Duryodhan said. I tried my very best. I went everywhere, but I could not find one person who was more qualified than me. This is his nature. But Yudhisthira came back saying, I also failed. I went out the entire day and I couldn't find anyone who was less qualified than me. He saw everyone in that way. So what to speak of seeing someone like an enemy? So this is the consciousness we have to aspire to. If we see everyone in their constitutional position as a living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, then we won't be tossed around between the consciousness of friends and enemies. We will see each one on their path in this material world, experiencing the threefold miseries, ultimately, hopefully, coming to the point of being touched by Krishna's mercy in the form of Krishna consciousness being given by a devotee, and thereby opening their door, their pathway to real liberation, to Krishna consciousness. If we see everyone in that way as a potential recipient of Krishna's mercy and understand that Krishna is in everyone's heart, then where is the room for enmity? There'll be no room for enmity. But we have to see ourselves and give ourselves that opportunity as well. Sometimes we berate ourselves too much, right? We are harsh on ourselves. It happens sometimes, even in the process of Krishna consciousness. And we think ourselves worthless. Sometimes we take those statements by great devotees like Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami too far without qualification. I am lower than the worm in the stool. If someone hears my name, they will be destroyed. All their piety is completely taken away. We are not qualified to think like that, actually. We do not have the adhikar to think like that, actually. Because when we think like that, it actually becomes a show of Krishna consciousness. It's not really depth there. And His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he discusses the difference between humility and low self-esteem. Anybody knows what he says? It's brilliant, such a brilliant presentation in one line or two lines. He said, humility means to think of oneself less. In other words, if you put it in terms of time, we're always thinking of ourselves. Right? Everything we encounter is, how is this going to reward me, affect me, benefit me, or have some adverse effect in me? How can I use this situation for my progress, my advancement, materially we're speaking now? So humility means to think of oneself less. Spend less time thinking of oneself and more thinking of Krishna and the glories of the Vaishnavas. And low self-esteem means to think less of oneself. There's you can get the difference? That you have a certain quality, you have a certain worth, and that worth, being a pure spirit soul, is actually unlimited. But we do not give ourselves that appreciation, that we are parts and parcels of Krishna. We have such wonderful self-worth to be used in Krishna's service, but we don't consider it. We actually think we are useless and thereby not worthy of even engaging in Krishna's service and being touched by Krishna's mercy. That's also very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. So we must be kind to ourselves and see that we all are eligible, no matter what our situation is. We can be the most degraded person, but we all have the eligibility to serve Krishna and be touched by Krishna's mercy. And when we think of ourselves in that way and take advantage of the opportunities that Krishna gives through his devotees to engage in his service, to engage in Krishna consciousness, we must then, it is natural to want to give others the same opportunity, the same recognition, see the same worth in them, and award them also pathways back to Krishna to realize this full self-worth as well. All right, I will stop here. Any comments or questions? Yes, Rukmini Dasi.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I was thinking about in that sequence of contemplation of the objects of the senses and how the whole thing goes down. How would we apply it to anger in a situation where it's not really an object? Because anger usually also comes up between people. So like I had an agreement with Moiteri, for example, and say he doesn't do it and I get angry. how do I see that same sequence in that situation?
Well, you had an agreement, that agreement wasn't honored, so you felt shortchanged, and your reaction could be many things, could be anger. So if you feeling shortchanged and showing anger is a reaction to the subtle need for respect being minimized, then that's harmful. Because he didn't fulfill his part of the agreement, it showed disrespect to you, made you feel less valued by him. So your response in the form of anger is detrimental, because it's responding to your need on a material level to be respected. However, if you become angry out of concern for Moiteri, to correct him from not doing things like that and hurting people, then that's necessary. But it has to come from a qualified place. It has to come from a qualified place. This is a very hypothetical arrangement. So, if a senior Vaishnava, especially the spiritual master, sees in a person, in a disciple, the need for rehabilitation and correction, it can come across, it can be conveyed through the medium of anger for purification. Anger can be a very purifying tool in the array of methodologies that the spiritual master has. It can be, right? But when we employ it in a way just to protect our self-worth and our level of respect we desire from others, then that's detrimental. It goes against the whole principle of humility. Trinadapi sunichena tarorapi sahisnana. It goes against it. So when we succumb to anger in that way, then what's next after anger? We become bewildered. If we do that more and more times, we become bewildered to the extent that, you know what, any situation and anyone who doesn't agree with me, they have no value anymore to me. They're expendable. It can actually come to that point. It can reach that level. So one has to honestly calculate, if I'm getting irritated, if I'm expressing anger based on what someone has done or not done, according to an agreement or not, to me, where is it coming from? Is it coming from a concern for that person's welfare, or is it just responding to my need and my position? Can we make that louder? I don't know if others can hear what she's saying. It's on, but oh. Righteous anger. There's no such thing as righteous anger. Well, why do you feel you have a right to be angry? Yeah, but what right do you have? I'm still trying to figure out your right in this situation. Of course, having said that, we are not pure devotees. We are covered with emotions, and these emotions are used in Krishna's service. So we also have to understand and appreciate that I want to be well situated in a surrounding that in the best possible, in the optimal way, supports my Krishna consciousness. And if I'm surrounded by persons who are just reneging on things and I'm trying to do service, then it's weird. I'll get frustrated. My attempts to serve Krishna become hampered. So, as you know, the pastime of Narada Muni and his snake disciple. Narada Muni had some interesting disciples. You heard of the snake disciple? So this disciple, by being initiated by Narada Muni, became very gentle, and then the children and the villagers in that area began to take advantage and throw stones, and he would just be humble and cower. And so he mentioned it to Narada Muni, and Narada Muni said, okay, that's very nice, but don't forget to raise your hood and hiss. Right? And when he did that, he noticed he was being taken a little seriously. Right? So yes, I wouldn't say we have to become, it's not a point of anger, it's a point of asserting one's basic need to others. It doesn't have to be, if someone sees it as anger, especially if you know where you're coming from, in responding in a way to someone who has wronged you, if you know where you're coming from, then that's not anger. It's actually useful, raising your hood and hissing. But no biting. Biting is where the problem is, to cause harm to that person, to go behind the person's back and tell everybody, hey, you know what this person did, don't trust him again. No. Vaiteri, when you did this is how it made me feel, and I didn't appreciate it. We can make it about me and not about him. We can express our feelings that this is how I felt, and I really value your association and our service together, but it'll be difficult to move ahead. So I won't take it as anger. I will take it as asserting one's natural right and need. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, Satyarani. Okay, Raghunath Bhatt. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Krishna allows / arranges all our experiences in our life as a devotee as opportunities to purify our consciousness. So whatever setback we have in Krishna consciousness, whatever positive or difficult interaction we had with someone, first, I mean, it's not easy. It's like almost having this rubber band on our wrist that pull it and remind us all the time. But it's always an opportunity to purify our hearts and come closer to Krishna, or to be degrading ourselves and turn further from Krishna. Every single thing is there. But we must be intelligent. It must be intelligent in how one uses those things. Yes, Satyarani? You heard of the serenity prayer? You heard of the serenity prayer? I mean, sometimes I get it wrong. I'll just quickly, it's such a wonderful prayer. Serenity. Anybody knows it offhand? Serenity prayer. Yes. God, Krishna, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It goes further. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, taking this world as it is. Okay, some of it may be a little. but this is a good one. And trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will. So yeah, the situation that she brings up is when one is involved in some engagement, some activity, and has, according to one's realization, a certain vision and plan and desire to serve Krishna in a wonderful way, but certain circumstances and personalities and atmosphere doesn't support it, that vision, or frustrates it. So what does one do? I'm sure all of you have been in that situation. Channeling His Holiness Kadambakanana Swami and Purijan Prabhu. Kim karomi aham. What to do? What to do? And what would Maharaj say? Do something. What? And then he would answer, chant Hare Krishna. But seriously, when one chants Hare Krishna, it's a prayer for service. It's a prayer to bring Krishna closer to you, to serve Him. And we have to constantly ask ourselves, what is my level of tolerance and digestion in this situation? Do I need to adjust and accommodate more and more? Or am I just really wasting energy, which I could apply in a better place, in a better situation? Sometimes that happens. And then one should look and ask one's spiritual guides, spiritual mentors, who one has faith will not just, mollycoddle you and say, yeah, you actually, it's right, and these people, and no, may be open to telling you that, hey, I think you need to adjust. Very often, in most cases, adjustments are needed on all sides. And patience. Patience is required as well. I'm trying to give an example that could be relatable from my own life. I went through a certain experience maybe 10 or so years ago, where for the life of me, I just couldn't understand why this whole group of devotees weren't getting it. Why weren't they seeing what I am seeing? It's so clear. And two devotees in particular completely agreed with me. Two of my most senior mentors completely agreed with me, right? But they weren't pushing the agenda that I had as much as I was. And I just started getting so frustrated in the whole experience. And eventually, I guess Krishna helped me by saying that, yes, these two very saintly persons are in complete agreement with me and my ideas and my view of things. But they weren't pushing it. They were more peaceful to just wait, continue your service according to one's capacity, and just wait when the conditions are more favorable. I saw that in them, and I realized, okay, maybe I should try that. It really, really helped. It really, really helped. Boy, so you can do one of many things. You can push through and get everybody to change and the atmosphere to change and the environment to adjust. You can push through. But as one's pushing through, look back from time to time and see if there's any casualties in one's relationships, in devotees who are getting burned out. Or one could just change one's surroundings, one's environment. Or one could be more patient and adjust and tolerate and wait and adjust in that incremental way. I'm sorry that's not a comprehensive answer to you, but I hope there's elements to it that may help. Anyone else? All right. We should go for prasadam. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Go Premanande.